All right, let's go ahead and get started so we can make use of the time that we have together today. Thank you for coming. Welcome to Globe Observer Connect. We're so happy to have you here, and we're also really happy to welcome our collaborators at the NASA Disasters Program. I will introduce them in a second, but before I do, I want to remind everybody that this event is being recorded. So if you're uncomfortable having your face shown or your voice heard, you can keep your camera off and put your questions in the chat. But otherwise, you're welcome to speak up and ask questions when we reach the question and answer period. So welcome. Today's Connect conversation is with the NASA Disasters team, and they are going to introduce themselves. But we were so excited to work with them last year on a pilot project to map land cover and land cover change in response to disasters or in preparation for disasters. And I'm excited to hear from them how that project went and what kind of data they got and how it might apply to the work that they're doing now. So I will hand it over to Kristen to introduce their team and to give us an overview. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly. My name's Kristen Oakhorn. I'm a research scientist at NASA Ames Research Center out in California and have been with the Disasters Program for coming up on 2 years now. Over to you, John.
Yeah, I'm John Cooney. I'm a research physical scientist here at NASA Langley and a center response coordinator for the Disaster Response Coordination System here at NASA. And I've been in my role for the Disaster Response Coordination System, or DRCS, for a little bit over a year now.
Hi, my name is Mary Klebb. I'm also at NASA Langley Research Center with Jack, and I am another one of the center response coordinators for the DRCS. And like Jack, I've been in this role for just about a year now. So, how is NASA involved in disaster response? Well, NASA has numerous satellite-based instruments on more than 20 Earth-facing satellites that make a variety of Earth observations. And this satellite imagery can be used to track evolving hazards over time, such as storm movement, flood extent, wildfire progression, and damage severity. And at NASA, we have this program, the Disaster Response Coordination System, which leverages this satellite data to provide timely and global situational awareness during emergencies to aid disaster response efforts. And satellite data can aid in identifying areas of greatest impact that help first responders focus efforts where conditions are most severe. And on the right, in the lower right, you can see two images before and after Hurricane Sandy, which show the devastating impacts that the hurricane had on this community. There's a wide area that was completely washed out, with many homes and buildings destroyed entirely or severely damaged. Next slide. So satellite data can be very useful in monitoring disasters. It provides a broad, rapid view of what's happening over a large area, but it has its limitations. For example, satellite imagery can be blocked by cloud cover. This is a common issue during storms when the images are most needed. And even when skies are clear, we're looking at the Earth from 100 miles above, so the resolution isn't always detailed enough to capture small-scale impacts, such as the height of floodwater or the extent of damage to buildings. And in addition, some of the highest resolution satellites only pass over the same location every few days. So we would need these overpasses to coincide with cloud-free conditions to get usable imagery. Next slide. So Jack and Kristen and I wanted to see if by engaging with Globe, we could fill some of these gaps or provide information when satellite data was not available. And we also wanted NASA response mappers to help empower communities to support disaster response through citizen science. So during the pilot, volunteers used the Globe Observer app to take repeat photographs of an easily accessible location, and if possible, have it be someplace that could or would experience damage from a storm. We timed the project to coincide with peak hurricane season from October 1 to October 31 to hopefully increase our chances of experiencing a storm. And our outreach focused on the 11 states you see in the shaded area. And we also included Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so this is the area that would be most likely to experience hurricane impacts. But even images outside this focus area still matter to us because change happens everywhere. And today's calm scene might be tomorrow's before photo that helps first responders assess the impact of a storm. Next slide.
All right, so we have a little bit of information here about how we planned to use all of this data and these images that we collected. And so where does your data go? The DRCS created this online dashboard to help visualize images for disaster response. So here you can see a map. It's a little bit hard to see, at least on my screen, but there are a ton of really small dots on this map here that show where a lot of the different photos were taken. And if you click on each of them, you can see kind of the sidebars on the left and the right that show more details, so any metadata that was recorded along with the photos taken and all of the photos in sequence. Globe users, when you take a photo, Globe users will know you have the option to take 6 to 10 photos, so up, down, left, right, east, west, however you want to look at it. And so you can see all of those in sequence for each location, and then there is a slider as well where you can see over time where different images were taken in the same location to see change happening. So we really created this to help us with disaster response. I think we'll talk about this a bit later, but luckily there was not any major hurricane that made landfall in the US, so we didn't really get to use this for a specific NASA coordination specific disaster that happened, but it was still really useful information. And we're glad that we had the time to really build out this dashboard and create kind of a useful tool while we weren't inundated with some major event happening. That gives us a lot more time to work on it. Next slide, please. So we have a little bit in here about some of the outreach and engagement that we worked on to kind of advertise the project. And so there were a few different articles and news coverage that came out of it. So our DRCS communications team wrote an article on the pilot project that was published to the NASA website in early July. And as of December, it had received nearly 6,000 views. So that was really great for getting the word out about the project. And then once that article came out, there were quite a few other news outlets that decided to pick up the story and kind of run some version of that from the article. Which included ABC News, Good Morning America, Florida Today, and The Independent. And we'll show a little bit some of the statistics of users and photos that came out of these, but overall, we do think that they were really beneficial for engagement. Next slide, please. There was also some other online engagement and discourse. So both the Globe team and NASA Earth team made posts to Twitter or X, basically about the project with some intermittent reminders to take photos. And so the Globe team, when looking at kind of the stats from all of the tweets that they posted, we did notice that ones that went up close to when a tropical storm was about to hit or right after it hit tend to see the highest viewership. This one here had about 443 views. Some of the other ones that were kind of not around a storm got more like 50 to 100 views. So it definitely did make a difference. If people were, worried about a storm, they were more likely to engage with the post. The ones that came from NASA Earth had much higher viewership just because the NASA Earth account has a lot more, followers and engagement. But since we don't own the NASA Earth account directly, it was a lot harder to get tweets posted to that account. So that's something we want to keep in mind for next year. We kind of also realized there was some downstream sharing of some of these Twitter posts and articles and other websites like Reddit. And the comments on some of those were kind of crazy. So that just kind of was a good reminder to us that, once it's out of our control, we can't really decide what the narrative goes with it. So that was a good reminder to all of us to be really clear and concise in these communications that we put out. Next slide, please. All right, so we kind of have a breakdown here. The top plot with the blue line is the number of registrants for the NASA response mappers within the Globe site. And then the bottom graph is the number of land cover observations. And so we've kind of broken this down by some of the different outreach activities that we had going on at the time. So 7/14, so July 14th, the outreach begins. That's when that article first came out on the NASA website. On July 21st, we had our first webinar with the Globe team, and that's kind of when our user base started to pick up a little bit. Then in August, we had started engaging with the Civil Air Patrol to get some of them to collaborate and upload photos. So things ticked up a little bit from there. And then towards the end of August is when all of those other media outlets, so the ABC News, the Good Morning America, picked up that initial article. And we had a really steep rise in the number of users from there on out. We did host a second webinar in September, which was meant to kind of keep engagement up. But unfortunately, I think we'll talk about this a bit more later, but with the government shutdown that happened from October to mid-November, we weren't really able to keep advertising. So we did at least see steady growth in our numbers during that time, but no kind of, massive shift like we see in some of the earlier parts because we weren't really able to do the continued outreach and engagement. But I guess along with this, our engagement with the Civil Air Patrol and Red Cross, I think in future iterations, we learned a lot from this experience and could better collaborate with them. But we're really appreciative of their support and think that I think the Civil Air Patrol one on here is pretty telling of increased users was really helpful for the project. And just a couple of stats that we collected. This was back in December, but we had almost 170 team members who collected almost 594 observations of land cover, and with each observation being quite a few different photos. We had over 3,600 photos, so that was a really great showing of different locations. And we did also receive photos taken in every single one of the states and territories that we had initially set as part of our geofence. So we did have really great coverage of the southern United States and the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. So we were really happy with the results of this, even given the challenges with the shutdown and things like that. We did have really great coverage. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on a little bit to what Kristen was saying there. So North Carolina, Virginia, and Texas actually contributed the most observations, while Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Kentucky contributed the fewest. We actually didn't give a ton of advice to participants about where to take the recurring globe observations. We focused on telling participants to take photos that were really convenient for them, so near homes, work, etc. But we really emphasized convenience. So it was really interesting to see in some of the data, some of the land cover image patterns that people were taking into their own hands here. And so, for example, in Puerto Rico and Florida, we saw globe users often took photos as a grid, which systematically observing different areas. And if this was in the event of a disaster, this would be fantastic because it would provide emergency managers with a lot of different data to work with and understanding of the pre-event environment. I'm going to talk a little bit more here now about some things that we saw in some of the imagery. And so while we were unable to comprehensively evaluate how emergency managers would use this tool, because as Kristen mentioned, there was no landfalling hurricane during our pilot period, we did find a couple of examples of globe observations made in the immediate aftermath of tropical storms or hurricanes in the area. In one case was a tropical storm Chantal, which made landfall in South Carolina on July 6th and produced about 7 to 12 inches of rain in a 24-hour period across North Carolina. In the following weeks, we found that a globe observer captured road damage here at Camp Easter Road on August 18th, September 8th, September 16th, and September 30th. You can see there was complete road failure in the images with significant pavement collapse and embankment erosion, rendering the road impassable and requiring it to be closed off. You can see that here in the upper left with the barricades. If photos like these were taken in the immediate aftermath of an event, they could potentially provide emergency managers with critical real-time infrastructure intelligence. Some thoughts about what this could do is these observations might be able to enable officials to assess impacts on emergency vehicle access routes, update transportation routing systems to redirect traffic around damaged areas, coordinate with local authorities on barricading and hazard signage, as well as identify potential isolation of neighborhoods or facilities dependent on affected roadways. This type of real-time infrastructure damage reporting becomes especially crucial when official assessment teams may be overwhelmed or unable to survey all of the affected areas immediately. And so it's really good for like widespread events covering large swaths of area. The temporal nature of these observations is also really interesting because it provides insights into how citizen science data could inform resource allocation decisions throughout both the response and recovery phases. So while initial damage reports might trigger that immediate emergency response resources, the multi-week span of follow-up observations demonstrates the sustained value of citizen science in monitoring for documenting recovery. In addition, such temporal documentation could provide evidence for federal disaster declarations and damage assessments, could support insurance claims and reimbursement processes, or document the true duration and scope of the infrastructure impacts and potentially inform future mitigation and resilience planning. One other case that we saw here was from Hurricane Helene. And this made landfall in Florida on September 27th before tracking to the Appalachian Mountains, where it caused over 100 fatalities. There were widespread power outages and really just catastrophic damage all across North Carolina, but in particularly in the Asheville region, which got hit very hard. And so for this case, a Globe user actually took observations near Beaver Lake, which is just north of Asheville, on October 11th and October 21st. You can see here in these top photos, which are the October 11th ones, which is 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene's passage. It illustrates extensive tree damage. You see that there are large mature trees that were uprooted and toppled across the landscape, created debris fields that blocked roadways and posed ongoing safety hazards. The roadside images show substantial tree debris that had been cut and stacked, indicating that active cleanup operations were underway, but they were still far from complete. The water conditions here in the upper left, documented at Beaver Lake, reveal the complex hydrological impacts and recovery challenges that Hurricane Helene Hurricane Helene created. You can see the lake levels are very turbid and sediment-laden water, which resulted from the storm's heavy rainfall as well as storm runoff. Notably in the notes, the Globe users' field notes, they indicated that this water was elevated and it was actively being managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, who were actually extracting it to cool generators at the local hospital. The follow-up images here below, you can see it's taken about 3 weeks after the storm, and it shows measurable environmental recovery. The lake water here in the bottom left has become noticeably clearer as the settlement has settled and water levels have receded, but you still see that persistence of tree debris and the ongoing need for alternative water sources 3 weeks post-storm. And this illustrates the extended recovery timelines that some of these major hurricanes can create in mountainous regions. But like I said, we aren't able to comprehensively evaluate how emergency managers would have used this tool as there was no landfalling hurricane. We believe this extended monitoring capability can distinguish citizen science approaches from single point in time assessments and provide emergency managers with ongoing situational awareness about recovery progress across their jurisdictions. And during these major disasters, they affect hundreds of thousands of infrastructure sites, and such persistent monitoring would be impossible through traditional field assessment teams alone. And so this could potentially fill a critical information gap in both the immediate response and long-term recovery efforts. There was some good news and bad news. The good news, again, was that there was no hurricanes that made landfall. However, like I mentioned, this meant we were unable to validate the pilot's concept. We don't know if or how this would have motivated volunteers to support their communities. We couldn't iterate on the data delivery system to stakeholders to determine what would be the most efficient or useful for emergency managers. And we couldn't really assess how the Globe app would actually work in a real disaster environment. This whole pilot program started as a very grassroots effort. And being new to this role at NASA and with the DRCS still really in its infancy, we had identified Globe in the spring of last year and thought it had the potential to be a really useful tool. However, it's also very different from all the other products that the DRCS has been producing. This is also a first ever DRCS pilot, and we were navigating uncharted territory. And I think that we underestimated the runway needed. We had some optimistic assumptions that 30 years of Globe users with our DRCS emergency management context might lead to seamless implementation. But there was some significant infrastructure and relationship building that would have been best served if we had started before hurricane season. Initial pre-event imagery from volunteers was limited. Globe had not been used in such a manner in the past, but fortunately they did have a lot of great existing relationships with organized groups such as the Civil Air Patrol. And once we really began connecting with these sorts of groups, the participation spiked, as Kristen had shown. and volunteers provided really valuable pre-event baseline imagery. And so we learned that projects that require an expansive network of volunteers should really prioritize outreach to established volunteer organizations, as these groups are filled with highly motivated people that really care about their communities. Luckily, because there was no landfalling hurricanes, we did have some time to meet with representatives of FEMA and start to get an idea of their hopes for a product such as this. And as these organizations are primary stakeholders, their needs should really drive product design. And we realized that early and continuous EM engagement is essential for product relevance. However, the government shutdown did last the last third of the project, which prevented government employees from working and supporting this project. But infrastructure, partnerships, and stakeholder relationships really do need time to mature. And some aspects won't be fully figured out until we actually test them in operation. But these emergency managers understand their operational structures during events like this better than we ever will. Despite all these challenges, we believe the pilot was an important step toward maturing the partnerships and infrastructure needed, and it gave us a much clearer understanding of the runway required and the foundational work to launch similar initiatives within the DRCS going forward. That's all we have. You can learn more about the NASA Disasters Program here at disasters.nasa.gov. We're exploring a continuation of the product, so stay tuned if you're interested in future iterations. Please leave your email in the chat if you want to be notified about any future iterations of the project. And again, everyone who participated and took photos for us, thank you. It was greatly appreciated. And we're happy to take any questions.
I think the first question in the chat, you just alluded to a minute ago, and it has a couple thumbs up. So I think multiple people would like to know more about what you plan to do in the future. And you may not even know yet, so that's fine.
Yeah, we're still working through that. There's a process that we're going through with our management, where we're writing up a report about the pilot currently, and based on that report, we're going to do some analysis basically and understand, is this project worth pursuing based on how much time and effort goes into it essentially. I think that it would behoove us to continue the project, because I think we've installed a lot of great infrastructure in place right now. And I think that moving forward, it's going to be a lot simpler than the initial phases of developing all of these relationships that we had to do. We have them now in place. And so I think that it'll be easier going forward. But again, this is something that we're going to be talking with our management about, and hopefully we'll see what happens in the coming year. But thank you to all of you who are interested and have added your emails to the chat. It's greatly appreciated.
Do you have any interest in, I know the pilot was looking for hurricane damage. Do you have interest in other types of disaster mapping through a project like this?
Yeah, we've actually talked about this quite a bit. We chose to do hurricanes because they're relatively easy to predict where and when they're going to be, and they're very highly visible so for outreach purposes. And so this was our way to sort of get our foot in the door. How we would expand that into other areas is something that we have talked about at least, but we haven't pursued anything further than that yet. But there are some interesting ways I think that this could definitely be used. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, it's clear there's lots of interest in the chat, lots of people asking for additional information. Any other questions from the group? I jotted down several, but I'll let others chime in first.
And your emails, if we continue it, we'll be sure to email you all and say, yeah, we're continuing this. Please sign up and things like that. So yeah, thank you guys again.
So one kind of detailed question I had, I know you set up a Globe team for this project so that you could see all the data on a map coming into one place, which makes a lot of sense. But in your dashboard, did you also pull Globe data that may have been collected by somebody who didn't know to join the team? Or did you just grab team data?
We didn't just grab team data. So for the
Okay.
portal ourselves, we grabbed it actually in a little bit larger region than the geofenced area that we had initially specified. So yeah, I can go back to that real quick here and show you. So we actually grabbed data from the start of 2004 here through December, through November of 2025. And so that's why you see these 27,000 photos. We did grab a little bit larger of an area here. So we did include others as well, just, making sure that we encompass the entire region, see if there was something where somebody might have grabbed a severe storm case or something like that, or heavy snowfall in a region, see how people might be using it. It's in a case like that. Yeah, does that answer your question? I think, yeah, we did grab a larger
Absolutely.
region. Yeah.
Great.
And we noticed that some people had some challenges joining the team or joined a different team. And so we wanted to make sure that we included all of the observations, whether they were part of the team or not.
Right, right. Any other questions before I jump in with more of mine? So one thing you said that I thought was really interesting is that in the social media conversation around this project, you had noticed a number of misconceptions. And I see quite a few people here in the group today who work with either communities or schools, who work in the education environment, who might be well poised to help us think through how to better communicate some of those misconceptions. Um, do you have any particular examples of things we should be aware of in the future? And it
um, Not a particular example, just things were political, I would say. Things got political in nature.
That's fair.
Um, and so when things get political, I would say that people draw sides and draw conclusions regardless of whether or not. And so I guess like one instance was that with the deferred resignation program, they thought that we were using volunteers to replace people that were actually working
Oh,
on the
interesting.
project, when in fact this was something that's been going on for 30 years as part of Globe. We're just trying to reuse it in another manner, essentially. So that was I
Yeah,
think the main misconception, is that people thought we were trying to replace people whose jobs that were doing this in the past, but that wasn't the case.
right, right. That's a good thing to be aware of.
So, Holly, there's one in the chat from Bill that I think we can answer as the Globe Observer team. I currently participate in NASA Globe with Cloud, so would I need to join Land Cover? So it's the same app. It's in Globe Observer. So you don't need to create a new or different account in any way. All you would need to do is tap on Land Cover and do the Land Cover observations instead of the cloud observations. And then if you want to, especially looking forward to this summer potentially, and the NASA Response Mappers Globe team, which you can find on the Globe website. You can join that if you'd like, but as we were talking about a little bit earlier, if you take observations in the area of interest with land cover in the right time frame, they will be pulled anyway. So the joining the team is great, but optional. But no new account, no new anything, just tap on land cover instead of clouds in the Observer app.
You will also be required to take a little bit of training when you tap on land cover, just so that you're oriented and you know what we're asking you to do. But it shouldn't take too long. Any other questions?
quick one, Holly, this is Brendan here
Yes.
from the Globe program. I'm just interested in, did you look at the individuals? Did they maintain response throughout the entire period, or did you find that there was a lot of wavering um, in response to like the different communication techniques that you adopted?
Let me go back to that slide. Oops, a little too far. To go over this figure a little bit. We didn't really notice, I would say, any real trends like that that you're suggesting. I mean, things we did see, like the number of registrants, our team members really increased throughout the entire process. I would say engaging with the organizations was the most helpful, I want to say, with us. So we engaged with Civil Air Patrol as well as CAPSIG. And those two, I think, really boosted our numbers quite a bit. And so these are people who are already volunteering. And so because of that, they have an interest in something like this. And the other thing is they have an interest in disasters because both of those teams work in the disaster space. And so I think the bar to get their foot in the door was a little bit easier, I would say.
But Brendan, that raises an interesting question, and that might be something that we could try to do some analysis on the Globe Observer team, is look at those 169 team members on NASA Response Mappers and see how many of them joined right at the beginning of the project or after one of these media things. How many of them are also, for example, on a Civil Air Patrol team, so we know that they're also part of Civil Air Patrol. That's something that we might be able to look into from our side, just in terms of the characterization of who was on the team, and if we can identify where they came from, when they joined, and even at this point, did they, especially if they joined at the beginning of this, did they continue doing observations? I think those sorts of analysis are possible to do. We haven't done it yet.
One thing I did notice is I think a lot of the people were already somehow signed up with Globe, actually. A lot of the people who signed up with us were already signed up with Globe. But I think most of the photos that they had been taking in the past were clouds and not so much land cover. And so there was a lot more land cover images, I would say, versus for this specifically than there might have been in the past. And that's something that I did notice, is that I think that was the true, but
I would say that's probably true.
Yeah.
That aligns with our experience. Go ahead. Somebody else had a question.
I was going to add.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that we didn't talk about this during the presentation, but I also went back and looked at historically the number of land cover observations Globe has gotten from 2020 through 2025. And we did notice that there was definitely an uptick in land observations each month when we did this. The only other month that really, there was one other month, I forget when it was, I think it was August some year, when there was another land cover activity going on, and they had a number of land cover observations. But then our responses were definitely above historical, kind of stasis levels.
As somebody who participated in this, and I live in Florida, and I was quite happy not to deal with any hurricanes in the last year. But I was really interested in the pattern approach that some of the users adopted. Do you think that will influence how you approach, like, assuming you go forward with it? Do you think you would expand the methodology to have multiple photographs from the same area, but from different locations?
So if I can jump in, Brendan, because I don't know that that actually necessarily means they were. So this is, I think that has to do with the way the observations are displayed and the way the sites are defined in the Globe visualization system, rather than necessarily the exact, because I believe, was that from the Globe Viz system that showed the grid?
I'm not sure where John sourced it. It was one of
Yeah,
the slides
that
he
was
showed.
sorry. That was from there. Let me go back here. That was from our system, our portal. Yeah.
because I wonder if that's using it may be that the people were not observing in that precise grid, but that's where the site. So when a user creates a site automatically in the app, it uses the military grid reference system, and so the site coordinates, I believe, are sort of the lower left corner. So that particular grid pattern, we may need to look at that, whether that is because of the way some of the locations are stored in the Globe database rather than where the user was actually taking the observations. That jumped out at me when you showed this.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't see it in a lot of other places, but I saw it in these two, and I was like, "Oh, that's
Yeah.
and
No,
I
I
thought,
actually think
yeah,
that is how they're collecting the data. We've worked with two groups. Madeleine mentioned in the chat that Civil Air Patrol does use this grid structure. And they have a squadron out collecting data together. They'll go do this grid. We also had a group of interns who were using this grid structure for land cover to address questions that they had. And there was a big group working in July and August who may have contributed to this as well. So it could come from either of those places. It could be an artifact as well, but I know that there are groups who are collecting data this way for other reasons.
That's actually good. I'm glad to hear that, because I was worried for a minute that it was making it look like it was this organized pattern, when I know that when observations show up in the viz system, yeah, but that's I'm reassured by that, actually.
Yeah, the Civil Air Patrol did that on purpose because they were also practicing their rescue, how they do rescue missions. So they purposely did grid collection of data, which is exciting.
yeah,
And
yeah. I really am a fan of it.
locations that would flood. They knew the locations that are more prone for damage, so they chose those locations on purpose too.
All right. Any other questions? I know we're already over the time, but it's such a fascinating topic. I wanted to give you a little extra time today. Our February Globe Observer Connect, we're still settling the date, so please keep an eye on the website, the observer.globe.gov website, and we will post that date as soon as we get it figured out. But we'll be talking about some of the changes to the Globe account structure and some of the new opportunities for citizen scientists in collecting different kinds of data through Globe, and what that means. So I think it will be really exciting and interesting. So we'll get you more information as soon as we get that time settled. All right. Any last comments or questions before we close this out? Lots of thanks. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. It's really been rewarding for me to see how you were able to use the data and what a difference the community can really make. So I look forward to potentially working with you more. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who attended today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.